Zoas are a great coral for anyone from beginners to seasoned veterans because of their wide range of striking colours, the gentle movement they add to your tank, and their ease of keeping. But they're not always as easy as you might think, so today I'm going to talk you through how to keep Zoas based on my experiences over the 7 years I've been keeping them. And if you're new here and want a dose of weekly reefing goodness, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on anything. We're going to start off with water parameters. Because Zoas are soft corals, they don't require calcium, alkalinity and magnesium to make hard skeletons. But those three should be the staples of all three tanks, so it's still worth making sure they're stable, particularly alkalinity, as that can adversely affect your pH, which Zoas won't appreciate. But we're really looking at keeping salinity and nutrient stable. Zoas are tolerant of a wide range of parameters, and even to an extent swings in those parameters. But they will still appreciate stability as much as any other coral. So try to keep your salinity dead level at 35 parts per thousand, and your nutrients at around 0.03 for phosphate, and 5 parts per million for nitrate. While I always keep my tank away from zero nitrate and phosphate, I find the actual number isn't so important with Zoas. So don't worry if those levels are higher in your tank, as long as your tank is happy, the stability is far more important, and I've kept Zoas successfully in very high phosphate with levels over 0.4 and nitrate over 20. Now, I've often read that Zoas require regular dosing of iodine, and while I have no doubt that is correct, I don't usually dose iodine in my tanks. My ICP tests almost always show low iodine, and yet my Zoas grow like buggery. But with that being said, I currently am dosing iodine, and I haven't noticed a difference in the colours of the Zoas in the 2 or 3 months I've been doing so. So in my experience, supplementing iodine might be beneficial, but it isn't necessarily essential, and for me it's far more important to get the basics right. But if you do dose iodine, just go very slowly, as it can build up quickly and cause serious problems for your corals if your iodine levels are too high. And ideally send off an ICP test every few months to make sure you're not dosing too much. Next up, we're going to talk about placement. In terms of flow, I've never had Zoas suffer from having too much of the stuff. My scrambled egg Zoa garden at the end of my tank dances in relatively strong flow all day long and is one of my fastest growing colonies. In lower flow you might find debris settling among the polyps, and I often find small bits of gravel stuck to the Zoa stalks. Now they don't seem to mind that, although I guess it doesn't do them any good. So all in all, I'd say most Zoas can handle and will appreciate relatively strong flow, but will also tolerate relatively low flow. In terms of light, most places you'll read will say low to medium. But for most of the Zoas I keep, I steer more towards medium than low. In fact, this colony of Arc Woodstock Rainbow gets around 300 par and does extremely well. Although it's been acclimated to that over several months, so if you do want to keep Zoas in stronger light, make sure you build them up gently so you don't shock them. If Zoas get too much light, I find they can shrivel up like your Todger in winter, and that's what I think has happened with this particular frag of scrambled eggs. But if your Zoas are stretching up on their stalks, it's almost certainly because they're not getting enough light. And any of the Zoas in my tank that are in shaded areas do stretch up towards the light. Zoas look at their best when they're flat to the rockwork, so if your Zoas are stretching up, I'd recommend you either turn your lights up or move the frag to a higher spot in your tank. They won't go back to normal length immediately, but stretch stalks do retract in time, so bump up your lights slightly and monitor them until they return to normal length. With that being said, it's worth noting that some Zoas do seem to have naturally longer stalks than others. For example, if my Sunny Ds have longish stalks, that's to be expected. But if my Utter Chaos have long stalks, I'll take that as a sign they need more light. And you can see here that the Utter Chaos polyps at the back of the shot are stretching up, whereas the rest of the colony isn't. And that's because the back is shaded by a rocky overhang, so it's getting less light. Finally, on placement, you should try to isolate Zoas on their own rock wherever possible. Most Zoas do spread fast and can become a weed in no time at all. So setting aside their own little island like this will keep them from taking over your tank. Now, people often want Zoa gardens with bright and contrasting colours next to each other, but beware, some Zoas can dominate others. For example, these laser lemon Zoas have rather taken over what was supposed to be my most recent attempt at a Zoa garden. So if you draw up a short list of Zoas you want, ask around online to check people's experiences. Now you have the basics, we'll move on to feeding. My opinion on feeding Zoas is that it's not necessary, and in fact I'd advise against it for most people, particularly beginners. There's no doubt they benefit from food and will grow more quickly if fed regularly. But I've never found Zoas show better colours or health when being fed, and I find it's far more important to get your water parameters stable if colour and health are your main aims. In my experience, if you feed Zoas, you'll also be feeding other undesirable organisms in your tank, like algae, Aiptasia and vermitid snails. You'll also probably increase your nitrate and phosphate levels, so feeding Zoas can easily do more harm than good. If you're a more advanced hobbyist and want to maximise growth, then I'd say feeding is worth doing. But almost all Zoas spread very quickly indeed, so the last thing most of us want is for them to spread quicker. So what about troubleshooting then? Well, in my experience, identifying problems with Zoas is the same as with many other corals. Check your temperature, salinity, alkalinity and nutrients to make sure everything is okay and stable. In my tanks, too much light has been the most common cause of problems for Zoas, so try moving the frag to a lower light spot or turning your lights down if you can't move the frag. And feeding something like Red Sea Reef Energy AB+ is worth a shot too, as that can help sick corals recover. If you have a fish like a regal tang, angelfish, butterfly fish or rabbitfish, it's also possible that they are nibbling on your Zoas. Alternatively, it's possible you may have a pest on them, like Zoa-eating nudibranchs, Zoa spiders or sundial snails. So if you can pull the affected Zoa out, give it a dip in pest treatment and see if anything falls off. And just because another Zoa colony in your tank is fine, that doesn't mean your water quality is good. Some Zoas can just take more punishment than others. And there are a few more things you need to know. Zoas are often sold as single polyps, which is fine if your water is on point and your tank is established. But buying colonies of dozens of polyps is a far safer bet for beginners, as single polyps are much more prone to melting into nothing for no apparent reason. Zoas are also a great candidate for fragging and selling for a bit of extra pocket money. Now, you've no doubt heard that some Zoas contain a dangerous toxin, so do be careful with them. But serious incidents are extremely rare, so don't be put off by having a go, as long as you've done your research beforehand. One of the easiest ways I frag Zoas is to put the frag plug on a rock like this, then just pull it off when the Zoas have spread onto the rock itself, as they have done here in the top left corner. You can then sell the original frag plug, and you'll still have more Zoas left on your rock. So those are my thoughts on what you need to do to keep Zoas. If you have any questions, stick them in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for next week's video.